Well, we're going to start the discussion now. And first, I'm going to give you the definition of mental illness. According to the National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI, mental illnesses, if you want to take notes, are medical conditions that disrupt a person's thinking, feeling, mood, ability to relate to others, and daily functioning, and often result in a diminished capacity for coping with the ordinary demands of life. And here are the facts on mental illness. If your church is typical of the U.S. population, on any given Sunday, 1 in 4 adults and 1 in 5 children sitting around you are suffering from a mental illness. This is including those who suffer from short-term depressive episodes. Most chronic mental illnesses that are deemed serious include diagnoses like schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, borderline personality disorder, major depressive disorder, and obsessive compulsive disorder. So, my first question to the panelists is for the mental health professionals. What is your experience with your field of expertise? As in, how do you introduce the process of treatment to those with mental illness? So, how does one come about into a practice, or how do they know enough to come to see a doctor or a counselor?
So are you just so I can get clarity, are you asking if a person has a mental illness, how would they be able to know that they need help?
Exactly.
Is that, one of the things that I like to underscore when a person has a particular illness that they're struggling with is that it disrupts what would be called a social and occupational functioning. So if a person has trouble, holding a job, you know what I'm saying, and it doesn't come from, their behavior or rebellion or anything else like that. They have difficulty functioning in that aspect. Or they have difficulty connecting with people on a deeper level. They want to, they desire that, but there's something that is inhibiting them and keeping them or preventing them from doing so. In those particular areas defined by the criteria that we would use specifically in the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, or DSM, is that it disrupts that particular type of functioning, that they're not able either to engage in conversation, or they're not able to make meaningful connections, or something is preventing them from doing so. That would be kind of a red flag, if you will, or an indicator that someone may need, help in that aspect.
So to follow that up, how would they find somebody, I guess, to talk to them? Like a counselor, do they, look somebody up in the phone book? I mean, Google it, or?
I would love to answer the question, but I have 5 other panelists here that.
I'll give you a break. Yeah. I would say most of our clients, we have a large church referral base. So we have a lot of pastors or people within the churches that when people reach out for help, they will refer them to our office. So that's one way that we get a lot of referrals. Another way that people find counselors, and one of the most growing and most popular ways, is through their primary care physicians. So primary care physicians anymore are just not equipped to handle a lot of the struggles that people are having. So they will say, I know this person. It's good to know your local primary care physician, and your nurse practitioners, because they're becoming more and more popular. But it's good to know them. Our practice tries to familiarize ourselves with our most local referral sources, because they want to send their patients to somebody that they trust. So that's our second largest referral source. And then the third largest referral source is just people who have come to see us before, and they'll be talking to friends or family or someone somehow that's struggling, and word gets out that, hey, there's somewhere you can go. There's somewhere where you might be able to find some help, and there's hope out there. And so that's the biggest way that people come in, that I see in our company, is they come in either just through church referrals, or they come in through their primary care physicians, or more and more pain clinics, because we could get into the whole opioid crisis and pain, but they're much more utilizing counseling now because of drug addiction. They'll come from pain clinics, PCPs, and then also word of mouth is just huge. So people who have seen us before and trust our services.
Okay, thanks for that. Yeah, that answers that question, yeah.
Just another intentional thing, just kind of a practical thing. One example that I did before I came from San Diego was we had ended up in our local fellowship. We had created what was called essentially a resource folder. So it had we intentionally went on Google. We kind of mapped out the phone books, if you will. And we looked at our area, probably about a 10 to 15 mile radius, somewhere around there, and we actually had a listing of not just food banks and things like that, but counselors, mental health practitioners, clinics, free clinics in the area, things like that. And so if people were ever wanted a particular resource or a particular doctor or something like that, or counselor, they would be able to look in that folder without judgment. So we had it somewhere, they can go there and look at it. It was a physical folder, 3-ring binder. It was alphabetized and according to categories and things like that. So that was something that very practically we would be able to connect a person or a congregant to a person.
Out of your clinic or?
No, I'm talking about a congregation itself was able to connect to a mental health professional or practitioner or a clinic or something like that.
Yeah,
So.
resources in the community like that. Okay. Awesome.
I'm going to add just real quick, an excellent resource.
Can you put
I can't, sure. An excellent resource for everybody, just to add in.
You can just leave it up.
Add in right here is 411 is United Way. And if you dial 411, they can help you find help for just about anything. And it's for everyone. It's a free service. So whether somebody can't pay bills, or whether somebody needs a shelter to go to, or whether somebody needs a counselor, all kinds of United Way services. I just wanted to mention that because it's not very well known, but it's like call and ask a question and they can almost answer it like a dictionary or something. So 411 is an amazing resource if you have questions on how to, or even how to find groups, how to help people.
So, pastors, in your experience, how have you in the past handled people from the congregation who've come to you, church members that are concerned? Because pastors are what, first?
We're really the
They're on
first
front line there,
responders.
First responders.
In fact, Monday night, a woman showed up at our office and crying and couldn't even talk. And the FBI had been at their house earlier that day and confiscated all the computers. So you can well guess what kind of situation she was facing. And then I had to go and meet with the husband was at home with a gun. And I was the first responder. Now, he didn't necessarily have the gun out, but there was a gun in the house, I should say. And so it's stuff like that we pastors are faced with. And I don't know, I just got to having so many of them, it becomes almost second nature. But when you're faced with those kinds of things, you know that you're dealing with something. You're dealing with addiction or mental illness or something. But there's a lot more common things that go on in the church where somebody that's normally a talkative person or whatever, all of a sudden, either they're really talking a lot, or they're not making sense, or, more than that, for men, where they just get angry, they're just mad. And for instance, that's how depression shows up for men. So there's a lot of, and there's people that, you say as a pastor to yourself, dear God, please never allow him to be an elder. Or make sure that lady is never, because they're known as a stinker, they're hard to deal with, et cetera, et cetera. They're troublemakers. Everywhere they go, there's problems. And sometimes those are personality disorders. Sometimes people, or it's trauma. There's a lot of people who have trauma that their pain is dealing with them instead of them having dealt with their pain. And you find a lot of Christians want to sugarcoat pain by saying it's okay, God will be, and just sugarcoat it, quickly coat it up, and then not deal with the pain. Well, I always tell the guys in jail that I teach, if you don't deal with your pain deals with you. If you don't deal with your trauma will deal with you. And you can memorize, I don't care how many Bible passages you memorize, your brain filter system is on high alert, and faith comes by hearing, it comes by a function of your brain. And I always say, your mind is what your brain does. And if your brain isn't functioning properly or has a lot of stuff in the filtering system, it's going to be problematic. So I really believe pastors are really on the front line and probably know way too little about what it looks like. Only 3% report that they actually are prepared to even address the issue when it shows up. And yet more people first go to their clergy, then go to their physician, nurses, therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists, and any other kind of clinician, all combined. So clergy see it first.
Thank you for that information.
Except I would say that unfortunately, people are even loath to go to their pastor or their priest because of the stigma that we have of thinking that I don't want someone that I know so well think less of me. So developing, of course, a humble attitude as a spiritual leader is so important, and helping people understand that we're all broken in some way or another. But yeah, definitely you have it better than I do, because you have the personal experience of having to go through dealing with a mental illness yourself in such a way that you can really relate. But then you also have the clinical knowledge of being able, and most pastors are not like you. Most pastors are more like me. We may be well educated in divinity and in pastoral leadership, but we're not, that's not something that's focused on when it comes to getting your degree at seminary. They don't really spend much time helping prepare you for how are you going to deal with people that are struggling with anxiety disorders, mental illness of different kinds. And lo and behold, you wake up to it really quickly. And the pastorate, you have to, and then if you're wise, you educate yourself. And because the first thing a pastor needs to realize is that he's not qualified to handle every counseling situation just because he's been to seminary. And even though I have great confidence in the Word of God and in the presence of God to give people wise advice, I need to be wise enough to recognize when there's an issue that's not just an undisciplined spirit that the person has. Maybe they've never learned self-discipline. Maybe they've been through different types of so much mental abuse that they're not as stable, and some good counseling can help get them there. And I need to be able to recognize, when is there a chemical imbalance here? When is there some traumatic event that has taken them off what we might consider the normal spectrum? mentally and socially. And so we need to be ready to confer them to the professionals that can help them recognize what is it that I'm dealing with specifically. I think the average person is extremely happy when they're just told that this is the name of what you're dealing with.
Having an actual diagnosis.
Yeah, it's like, oh, okay, I'm not.
Crazy.
I was gonna say that. I'm not crazy, but,
I could use it.
I've heard it many times.
but, and so they need to be able to be referred to someone like that can then, especially if there are, and don't get me wrong, I'm not a medication pusher. But if somebody has chemical imbalances, all the good counsel is not going to straighten out that imbalance.
Part of what
They need professionals that can help them with that.
Part of what you're talking about is the problem in Christianity itself is the fact that we all believe, contrary to what science teaches us, that we all choose our behaviors. And what we've done is not understood theologically and from a biblical perspective what the brain really is. And the brain is no more spiritual than your large intestine, and if I knew you better, we'd go to other areas of your body, but it's just no more spiritual. The mind is what verges between the spiritual and the physical. And so there are literally there's no theology for the fact that emotions and feelings and things like that are based on chemistry, on an electrical current system in the brain. And when that's messed up, you're not going to be in your right mind. And what irritates me is I've been part of a national discussion in Washington, D.C. twice now, and the part of the problem is a lot of clergy want to always address behavior as choices, and it's more complex than that. And so...
Which we're going to get to.
Yep.
We're rolling around here, just on the outline, we'll be getting to that.